Welcome to the Battle Ready podcast, where we know that every single day is a battle. This show is about equipping you mentally, physically, and spiritually to win the daily battles. I want you to become totally free, whole, and powerful. It's time to step into your battles equipped and ready to win. I'm your host, Dr. Kaylee Judge. Let's get battle ready. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Battle Ready podcast. This is Dr. Kaylee Judge, and we are on week 2 of the Enneagram series. We've got 10 weeks in this series. If you missed last week, it was the intro of the whole deal, what it's all about. I think it's important, if you haven't listened to that yet, to go back and listen to that one before you dive into number 1. Listen to it, and then also I urge you to take the test because then you'll be able to kind of fall in line with where you are, who you are, and then Angie's going to go through the specific numbers, but then there's the wings and arrows and zigzags and all the things that connect to all the numbers that I'm really excited to learn about, because I know the numbers, but I'm excited to learn about the wings and the arrows and figuring out what all of that actually truly means. Fun fact for us, I had my team, my staff members, and my brother, who also works with me. We all did the Enneagram test. And so now we know what numbers we all are. And I really like the test that you gave us last week, Angie, because it says, it like gives you your number, but then it says how to get along with me, right? And so how to do life with me. And I think it's going to help us be able to relate to each other in an office setting as well. And I do have some questions from some of my colleagues, are like, hey, I want to do this with my team. So how, maybe either in the beginning of this or at the end of it before we dive in or something, you can kind of give us some practical things on how to lead team members using an Enneagram test. And so that we'll get into that at some point, but go and take the test and figure out what your number is, and then listen to this. We're going to go through Enneagram number 1, which is the moral perfectionist today. And I feel like it's going to go all over the place. So hi, welcome back.
Hello. I'm so excited. I look forward to my Fridays now. So
the best day ever.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. So I'm super excited about deep diving into each of the numbers. We can talk about how someone wants, or, some of your colleagues or whatever, how they want to take groups through. Everybody does it differently. That is some people that own their own businesses or lead people will just have them take the assessment and talk through. One of the things that I do is I go into businesses and corporations and do trainings, and then give them, things to work on and work through post training. So there's lots of things that businesses and organizations can do as far as working through the Enneagram. But you said we'll probably be all over the place, and it is. It's a little bit of a GPS ride. Like, that's what we say a lot of times, that the Enneagram is a little bit like an internal GPS, right? So if I want to go somewhere that I don't have a direction for, I obviously put it in my phone. I have the directions, and I'm headed to that place. Well, if I take a wrong turn, then what does my phone tell me? It says rerouting. And so it's a really good parallel to the Enneagram, because if we know ourselves and we feel ourselves taking a not so great turn in life, or in a situation, or in a conflict, then it really can be used as a tool to reroute ourselves. And so we do take lots of turns here and there when we talk about the Enneagram. So it's super
Something
fun.
that you said last week, you were quoting somebody else, and I'm not sure who it was, but it was talking about the Myers-Briggs test, showing us. Go through that, because I listened to that this week, and I was like, Oh my gosh, that is like profound.
Yeah. So, and you can really, the quote I heard just happened to have Myers-Briggs in it. You can put a lot of the, maybe not any, but a lot of the personality tools in the space. But it said, Myers-Briggs shows us how the world sees us. The Enneagram shows us how we see the world. And so really, and I'll be honest with you, my defenses were up a little bit when I was introduced to the Enneagram, because I was like, I don't need another personality tool to tell me what I already know. Mm-hmm. And that's not pride at all. It's just, I know I'm an extrovert. I know I'm a visionary. I needed at that space in my life, I needed something to give me guidance and direction into why I did some of the things I did, and reacted in some of the ways I reacted, because I was sick and tired of it. I was tired of responding in the same ways and didn't know how to do anything about it.
Yeah, it was cool when watching my team, we all kind of did it together, actually just this morning, and I was watching them like get their results, and they were like going through and reading, like, oh my gosh, this is so me. This is like so spot on. This is exactly who I am. So that was cool. So talk to us about a number one. Give us an intro overview of who this person is, what they're like, and then we'll kind of jump in and figure out a little bit more intimately about a number one.
Yeah. First, I wanna preface all of this that we're going to talk about with this. And I love this idea because it really helps us to realize when our defenses are going up. And so one thing that I kind of wish I had talked about last week in the intro that I didn't want to miss out on talking about this week as we jump into deep diving into the numbers is one of the things that Marilyn Vansell talks about in her book. I think I alluded to it last week, and hers is a very spiritually based, biblically based book on the Enneagram called Self-Deluded, Self-Defined. She talks about these 3 biological needs that we were all born with, right? We were all born with 3 biological needs. We were born with love and affection. We were born with the need for love and affection, power and control, and safety and security. And so when you look at those 3 biological needs that we were all born with, which the cool thing about it is when you look back at scripture and you look back in Genesis, what are the 3 things that God gave us? He gave us love and affection. It is not my will for man to be alone. He gave us power and control. He said, you have dominion over all the earth. And he gave us power and control, love and affection, and safety and security. He gave us the garden, right? And he said, this is your space. This is your safety. This is your security. Well, when sin entered the world, all of those things began to be threatened. Our love and affection began to be threatened. Our power and control began to be threatened, and our safety and security began to be threatened. So the interesting thing about this is, and I even counsel people through this, is when we feel our defenses go up, and we'll talk about the defense mechanism of each of the numbers, when we feel our defenses go up, without fail, we can see one of those 3 things that are being threatened when our defenses are going up. And I think that is super interesting if we will take a second to step back when we feel defended or we feel offended. What is it that's being threatened right now? And what do I need to do about it personally? Yeah. And so I just think that's really interesting as we deep dive into each of these numbers, because each of the numbers tend to have an insecurity in one of those more than the other. And that's really prevalent when we look at the triads, and we can talk about that too. But the moral perfectionists at their best, they're very ethical, they're very reliable, productive, they're wise, they're idealistic, they're conscientious, they're honest, they're orderly, and they're self-disciplined. They are the picture of right and wrong and black and white. They see things very, very black and white, and they have a hard time seeing the gray areas. At their worst, or in their not so pretty spaces, they can be very judgmental, inflexible. They can be very dogmatic, critical, uptight. They can come across as being very controlling. Anxious when things aren't being done the way they want them done, and very jealous if someone is doing it in a way that somebody else is suggesting it be done and not the way they feel it should be done. The interesting thing and the important thing to know about the one is there's a very strong inner critic inside the one. And so when we can be very hard on the one, saying, well, they're judgmental, or they just, all they want to do is point the finger. But really, as hard as they are on other people, they're just as hard, if not harder, on themselves. And so when we understand that about the one, it does offer us a space to extend grace to them.
So I was as my team was getting their results today, I went back and looked at my results I took this a year and a half ago, I think, or so. But my top two, which are like almost dead on, are 8 and 1. So yeah. I'm like
so those can be mistyped. They definitely can be mistyped. 8s and 1s can be mistyped because 1s can come across as very controlling, which 8s are that person that needs to not necessarily be in control, but they definitely don't want to be controlled. And so there are similarities there that can often be mistyped with the 8 and the 1. When you're unsure about what your number is, then there's things that we would want you to look at, such as, what is the core fear? Well, the core fear of a 1 is they fear being bad or evil. They fear being outwardly angry or being seen as not right or corrupt. So that is a core fear of a 1. They don't want to be seen as being corrupt or wrong. The core desire of the 1 is to have integrity, to have balance, to be very virtuous and ethical, and to be seen as that. So I always remind people that the 1, 2, and 3 on the Enneagram are very image conscious. And so for the 1, they're very conscientious about how they are being seen and how people perceive them. And they want to be perceived as having integrity. They want to be seen as having morals and ethics and values. And really, at the end of the day, they want to be seen as right.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. So, yeah. So that's the bare minimum of a 1. So we also talk a lot about wings. So have you looked into wings and things like that at all?
I have a little bit. I haven't enough to okay, here's my wing. I'll ask somebody their type and they'll be like, oh, I'm an 8 with a 9 wing. I'm like, I don't even know what that totally means. So I'm excited to hear. Can you explain what a wing means?
Yeah. So before we even go into the specifics of the 1 wings, I like to teach the wings a little bit different because a lot of people, and let me also preface, the test or the assessments that I enjoy giving people, or I like to see people take, are an assessment that gives you your top 3. And the reason I like that is because this is an electronic system that's just taking the answers to your test. It doesn't know you. Right. And so, but I like that it gives you your top 3 so that you can evaluate those 3 and go, okay, which one do I really resonate with? But so often I'll get this, hey, Angie, I took the assessment, and they'll take it down. So maybe they got an 8, a 1, and a 3. Maybe those were their top 3, and they'll go, I'm an 8 with a 1 and 3 wing. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not. And so it's interesting how that the wings, even more than the lines and arrows, are often misunderstood big time. And so I always like to say, okay, wings, think about it logically. The wings would be the 2 numbers on either side of your number. Those are, just like a bird, a wing. So I like to describe and teach the wings like I was trained in my certification. So think about your number as your home space, or a hard-boiled egg, right? That is your home space. That's who you are at the core. Then think about your wings. So we're talking about a 1 here. So we'll go with the 1. So the wings are going to be your 2 and your 9. And so 1 is your hard-boiled egg. Think about the 2 and the 9 as your salt and pepper. So your wings are really kind of how you flavor your number. And it's interesting because there's so many people that will say, so I'm a 4, and I would say, I was doing a new client consult yesterday, and she was like, do you care if I ask what you are? And I'm like, no, I'm not at all. And so I was telling her, and I say this, I'm a 4. I flavor my number, or I tap into my 3 more often than my 5, but every now and then I tap into my 5. Like right now in this whole coronavirus thing, and in this whole, shelter in place, is that what it's called? Shelter in place thing, where we have to stay at home. I'm having to learn to tap into my 5 more often. 5s are more introverted. They're more cerebral. They close themselves off and get work done. So I'm having to tap into and use my 5 more so than my 3 lately. So think about your numbers on either side, your wings as your flavoring. And some people flavor more with salt than pepper. Some people flavor more with pepper than salt. And some people use equal amounts. Every now and then you'll find a number or a person that really stays in their home space and doesn't tap into or use their wings at all.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think, I'm just trying to think about myself as I'm kind of like trying to analyze the things, but, so a 1 would have a 2 and then a 9 as their wings.
Yeah. So the 1 with a strong 9 wing, they're going to tend to be cooler. They're going to tend to be more relaxed, because remember, the 9 is the peacemaker. So while the 1 is very indignant on right and wrong, they're gonna tap into more of the peacemaker qualities. So they're gonna come across not as judgmental or harsh in some situations. They're gonna be a little bit more introverted than extroverted. They're gonna be more cerebral and more impersonal. And so they're gonna have a few more of those, or they're gonna flavor their number with a few more of those peacemaking qualities than they would if they were tapping more so or using their 2 wing more so, which type 1 using the 2 wing more often is going to tend to be warmer, more helpful, more critical. They're going to be more fiery, because 2s can have a little bit of fire in them. They're going to be more vocal and sensitive, more action oriented, because that's what a 2 does. They're very out there in front. And so it's just, but then again, your 1 can utilize both of those to some degree. It's how we flavor our number. It's why a 1 with a strong 9 wing looks so differently than a 1 with a strong 2 wing. It's why so many people go, well, I'm a 1 and they're a 1, but I don't feel like we look anything alike.
Yeah.
Well, that's what makes us different. And that's what makes this system so cool to be able to utilize and use and say, yeah, we do have commonalities, but I really tap into my 9 more often, or use my 9, and you use your 2 more often.
Yeah. Now, what about, like, you were talking about like arrows and lines? So how does that?
Yeah. So I like to talk about arrows and lines and arrows in the sense of how we kind of move about the world. And Ian Cron talks about this, and this is another difference maker in this system, the Enneagram, versus so many other systems. So many other systems, like the Myers-Briggs, they're static, right? They tell you how you are. They tell you you are a visionary. You are a leader, you are an extrovert, you are an introvert, right? They tell you these things. Those are very static characteristics. There's nothing about those things that change or move, right? But the Enneagram, on the other hand, is very different. It shows us how we move about the world because we're not static beings. We don't just stay, we move about the world. And so the lines and arrows are very, very important to understand in the Enneagram. So we really have every number goes to two other different numbers at any given point, right? So and I don't even like to say we go to, because that indicates we change from our number and we move to another number. What I like to say is that we exemplify characteristics of this number in stress, in growth, and things like that. So for the one, under stress, when we are, and I tell people this all the time, this can be in a stressful situation, so very short-lived, like I find myself in a stressful situation, or it can be like what we're living in right now, a stressful season of life. So under stress, a one will exemplify some of the moderate to unhealthy characteristics of a four. So what does that even look like? When they begin to exemplify some of those average to unhealthy qualities or characteristics of a four, they feel indignant that expectations aren't being met, and they turn their anger inward and become very depressed. They can be very they can be very emotional and get into their emotions, which fours are really good at. I know this because I'm a four. And so they can turn those things inwardly very easily, the way that a four does under stress, when they feel like things aren't going the way that they think they should go. So the lines and arrows, I always say, are a really big piece to self-awareness. Because if I am aware that I respond this way in a season of stress, I can stay there and find myself in a very average to unhealthy space, or I can take action and do something about it, right? And so the lines and arrows to me are a very, very good reference point for self-awareness.
Yeah, I think this is powerful, because then if you know, like you said, like, this lets you see how you see the world. And so part of seeing the world is seeing who you are. And the thing with this is, like, you could be standing there saying, I don't understand why I act like this when this and this and this happens to me. Well, now you know that that's a part of your quote unquote wiring. And now we can, like you said, either stay there and just roll with the punches, or make a decision to get back to your root. Is that what you're?
Absolutely. Yes. And that's where we go to. So under stress, that's what a one does. They exemplify those average to unhealthy qualities of a four. Well, in growth, they exemplify the healthy qualities of a seven. So the very black and white, right and wrong, indignant one can become, in growth, they can actually become more fun-loving and more adventurous and not so uptight, and they can actually enjoy life a little bit more. And so when we know this about ourselves, when we go, man, I have the capability of tapping into these awesome qualities of a seven that sometimes I judge because I'm like, they should be doing this, this, and this, not having fun. That I have the ability to tap into that part of me because it's a growth place for me. It is a path to growth for me to be able to lay aside the judgmental aspect of my personality and really engage in a more lighthearted view of life, which is what sevens do in their best qualities.
Hang on. So how do you figure out your wing? Like if someone's sitting there, like maybe they're not a 1, but they want to kind of figure out what their lines and their numbers are before we get into the next one. How did you figure out that these lines go to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So without your lines and arrows don't change. So if you're a 1, your lines and arrows are to a 4 and a 7.
Okay. And
so that doesn't
always
change.
It's always under stress, you have a 4, and then always under growth, you're at a 7.
Yeah. So yes, those are the lines and arrows for under stress. And does that mean that you always tap into that? No, it doesn't. That's why I like to teach that the lines and arrows on their own are just a really good resource for self-awareness. I teach self-awareness all the time. Something else that I teach all the time, and I intertwine my Enneagram training with what's called EQ. And if anybody's done a lot of study on EQ, which is emotional intelligence, we understand we have a ton of research that says someone with a high IQ and low EQ, or let me switch that. Someone with a high EQ, but maybe average to lower IQ, actually has more of a chance for success in overall life than someone with a high IQ, which is intelligence, right? And low EQ. Why is that? Because when we have the ability to be aware of our own emotions, but wait, one more thing, the emotions of others, the intuitiveness to have an awareness of the emotions of ourselves and others, then we have a stronger ability to be successful in life in general. And so this goes right along with that. It is a self-awareness tool that leads us or guides us, if you will, into stronger EQ.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. And so I'm studying a book right now. It's called The Enneagram Connection. And it's really awesome because I'm creating a training and PowerPoint on it right now. I've dabbled in putting little bits here and there in my PowerPoint in my training, but it's what are the EQ strengths of a 1 and what are the EQ weaknesses of a 1? Because that's really important to know, because I may be really strong in EQ right over here, but these are some EQ qualities that are really important for me to work on so that I can increase my ability to be successful in relationships, in business, in life.
We were talking about the lines and the arrows, right? They're going to certain things, and it's during under stress and during growth. Is there a thing for like a 1, an unhealthy 1 versus a healthy 1? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So that is what we call the levels of development or the ranges of health, right? So a healthy or at their best, 1s are fully, and this is really, talking in, well, let's do this first. Let's look at just the ranges of health.
Okay.
In general, that will help us then parallel it to each of the numbers specifically. So just in general, there's 3 ranges of health. And when you understand your ranges of health within your number, it's a really good self-awareness piece as well. So a healthy range in general for the Enneagram is in the healthy range of our personality, we are not strongly identified with our identity. And I know that sounds so crazy, but so much of the time we we too often or too strongly identify or find our comfort zone in our identity itself. And as believers, we understand that, yes, while God wired us a certain way, at the end of the day, we are the image bearer of Christ. Yeah. That is our identity at the end of the day, no matter what number you are, yeah. Right? And that is where our security is found. Our security, for instance, as a 1, is not found in the rights and wrongs of the world. Our security isn't found in how I perceive something to be black or white or right or wrong. And sometimes a 1 can find too much of their identity in that space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's in the healthy space, they're not too tied to that, right? We are free to express ourselves through a wide range of behavior. So what that means is we're not so tied to our number, but we're able to tap into our growth number. We're able to tap into our wings. We're more free to tap into a wide range of behavior and not just the strict right and wrong that we've set for ourselves as a 1. And we'll talk about the different numbers as we go throughout.
Yeah.
We believe that we can express and reinforce our identity through letting go of it and by acting in a manner consistent with it. So we let go of this idea that we have to rigidly walk this line of what our personality says we are. We let go of that, and then we can just act in a manner consistent with it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So that is in a healthy range. Well, the average range, some imbalances start to occur, right? Maybe we're shifting into that stress zone more often than we want to. Imbalances arise and our scope of concern narrows. So what does that mean? It means that while in a healthy range, we're able to open up our scope and see the perspective of others a little bit clearer and not be so rigid in our own. Our focus begins to narrow, and we begin to see only what we want to see. We begin to see the color of our lens and not the color of other people's lens, not the willingness to see other people's perspective is narrowing. Mm-hmm. And then in the unhealthy range, our focus is so narrow that our identity, we almost break with reality. And I like to use this example a lot because I have seen this a lot, and I haven't even been practicing coaching counseling for a whole long time, but I still see it quite often. I often ask people, have you ever been having a conversation with somebody and you're literally thinking in your head, is that seriously their reality? Like there is the ability for the human brain and the human spirit to create a reality in their head that is solely their reality. Right? And there's nothing that we call it narcissism, right? It's not always narcissism, but it can be. But there's literally a break with reality, and you're only seeing things from your perspective, and you're unwilling to go outside of that. So that is a really good, and I give this to all my clients, is what are the specifics of healthy, average, and unhealthy in your number? Because if you can use that in your growth journey, it's really important. I always tell people it's fine to visit your average space, but if you stay there, you're more likely to venture into that unhealthy space than you are to grow into your healthy space. So I always talk very strongly about it's okay to have moments of average, but don't stay there. Don't stay there, because the likelihood of you venturing down into your unhealthy is much more likely than the healthy.
So what does a person do that recognizes that they're in unhealthy or average? Like, how do you get back into the healthy range?
Right. So if you are in an unhealthy range, because there's such a break with reality, oftentimes there needs to be an intervention that I say you need to talk to somebody that can help you to see reality for what it is. The unhealthy space is the space that people find themselves in when they're reaching out to me, or they're reaching out to a counselor, or their marriage is falling apart, or they're losing their business or employees, or that's really the unhealthy space that we're talking about. Average space, you're still able to see things about yourself that you don't love and that maybe you don't want to recognize, but you realize I have to recognize these things if I want to salvage my marriage, or if I want to salvage these relationships or my business or whatever. And so really it's just seeing that there is a path to growth. There is a path to understanding that my number goes to, right? We said the 7 in growth. How do I get there? Well, I'm a firm believer, and this is where I'm a little different than other Enneagram coaches, because I bring my counseling into my sessions with me of other things that I've been trained in. And so I always ask people, behavior, in my opinion, behavior is a byproduct of what's internally going on inside of you. That I believe that with all my heart. And I am not a firm believer in behavior modification. We can't just modify behavior to save a relationship or to save face. We can't just modify. We can for a minute, but we can't long term. And so I always work with my clients, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're in the unhealthy space. I always work with my clients on what is the belief that is sending you back to this average place. What is the belief? What is the thought that translates to a belief that is sending you back to this unhealthy place or this average place? Because if we don't change the belief and the thought, then we're not going to change the behavior long term.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things is having the ability to identify the belief behind the belief, you know?
Absolutely.
And then once that happens, it's just really working backwards to recreating your lens. Like if I I have my glasses, if I were to put my thumbprint on my lens, I wouldn't be able to see straight. I would still be able to see, but it would be a different image that's coming up until I went in there and actually cleaned that off a little bit, and I was able to see clear again. So same kind of concept with that, like we got a little bit of a smudge on our lenses that we're trying to figure out with that, right?
Right, absolutely. And so with the 1 specifically, that's what we're talking about. So with the 1 specifically, oftentimes the belief, and let's keep in mind the belief that you're struggling with, or the thought that translates to a belief, because I believe a thought translates to a belief, and the belief then manifests the behavior.
Yeah.
And we act out of behavior. Or the behavior is a manifestation of that. So oftentimes the thought and the belief for the 1 is life has to be this way. Mm-hmm. That when I get to that average to unhealthy space, is everyone has to see life like I see it. It has to be right and wrong. And we get indignant when it's not that way. And so the change of belief says, or the change of the thought says, I can have my own convictions, but so can Jane Doe. And I can extend grace in that. And I can work to see this situation or whatever it is through a different lens. And there's growth in that for the 1, but oftentimes the 1's belief system is, I can't be wrong, therefore nobody else can be wrong. Therefore, there's this domino effect of you have to see things the way I see them in order for me to be right and you to be right in my eyes, which goes against the idea that we talked about last week, in the sense that there's 9 lenses, or there's 9 personalities, and that we are we do ourselves a grave injustice when we're unwilling to see the other 8.
Which is hard sometimes, because sometimes, like, especially in the like heat of a moment, it's like, man, like, why don't they understand this? Why don't they get it? And so, yeah, I can see that. That's big.
Yeah. And one thing that I work with, I'm working with actually something on my client is, what are the things with one of my clients, it's a specific relationship, right? So what are the things that I just have to accept? Because at the end of the day, we can't change everyone. We can't change every situation. So when we come to the end of ourselves, and this is important for a 1, when we come to the end of ourselves, what are the things that I just need to accept? And what are the things that I need to keep plugging away at changing, as far as either a person or a situation goes? And being willing to accept the things that I cannot change is really important for 1. If they can find that space and live in that space of understanding that, then they live with so much more freedom. Because there's bondage for a 1 in believing that I have to change everyone to see things the way I see them. There's bondage in that.
So so now what? You know what I mean? Like there's, like, how do we set these people free?
Yeah. So when we're talking from a biblical perspective, which I know we do, when we're talking from a biblical perspective, it's understanding what Christ says and Scripture says, as opposed to our belief system, right? So Scripture says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? And we're not going to find perfection this side of heaven. So it's understanding, it's taking on the fact that Jesus is the perfection. We will never be the perfection this side of heaven. So it's taking on that belief that I'm never going to reach perfection this side of heaven for the 1. For this, we're speaking specifically to the 1 today. And so what is the truth of Scripture that speaks to the beliefs that I am struggling with, that's holding me bondage? And that is something that I feel like is really, really helpful in releasing the chains. What does Scripture say? You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so the truth of Scripture has the ability to set all of us free in the false beliefs that we either believe about ourselves, others, or our circumstances.
And so let's say I'm not a 1, like I'm going to go interact with a 1. Like, how does a person that's not a 1 interact properly with a 1, or respect them, or recognize who they are? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I always do this thing, you alluded to it before, is how to get along with me.
Yes.
So this does not mean that I'm a chameleon. I'm not a 1, right? This does not mean that I'm a chameleon and I have to adapt or turn into a 1 in order to do life with this 1, right? It's just pointers. I parallel it a little bit to, we talked about it last week, the 5 love languages. It doesn't mean that I all of a sudden, because I'm physical touch and words of affirmation and my husband is not, it doesn't mean that I adapt to, or I become him. It just means that I affirm him in the way that he's affirmed, because he's not affirmed in the same way I am. And we understand that that goes against the grain of our nature, because our nature is to do what's natural to us. So if you are not a 1, these how to get along with me things does not come natural, but they're very helpful, especially in the workplace and especially in the home space. So how do you get along with a 1? What are some things that you can do? So take part in your responsibility, so that they are not always the one getting the work done or doing all the work. Affirm me when I am doing good or I'm excelling. They really like to, typically 1s do respond to words of affirmation. So when they are excelling, when they are doing good, affirm them. Realize that when I'm being outwardly critical, I'm actually being harder on myself. So that's what I alluded to in the beginning, of understanding that 1s are hard on other people. Absolutely, they are. But the inner critic inside of them is actually even harder on themselves. And so that's a place where we can really extend grace to 1s, of going, gosh, they are really being hard on me right now, but I have an understanding that they're being even harder on themselves. And to me, that gives me a ton of compassion, because I know quite a few 1s in my life. So my inner critic can be relentless. So remind me that even though things are not perfect, everything is okay because of what Christ accomplished for me. And of course that would be in a spiritual setting of affirming them. It would help if you apologize when you're wrong. This helps me to forgive. So it helps a 1 for you to realize and recognize where you were wrong. Because typically a 1 is overly realizing where they're wrong, unless they're in their unhealth and they don't ever see themselves as wrong. And that is a possibility. Help me by gently encouraging me to loosen up and have fun. And that's really important. Obviously be discerning as to when that's a good time and space to do that. But the reality is, like we said, in their growth, they have the ability to loosen up and have fun, because they go to that 7, or they exemplify the healthy qualities of the 7 in their growth. So they have the ability. It's in there. It is totally in there.
But I feel like for like a 1, I feel like if you were trying to have too much fun at the wrong time, it wouldn't go over very well.
Right. So let's say, for instance, if a 1 is deep into a project and they're hyper focused, for you to go interrupt.
Don't come do a joke. Don't come play a joke.
Hey, let's go have lunch at so and so. That would not be a good thing. Or if you're married to a 1 and they're hyper focused on, something in the home or relationally, or there's, then that's probably not the right. That's why I said, be discerning as to when that would be a good time and space. Maybe they get finished with a project and you're like, okay, let's go celebrate, kind of thing. Or, my spouse that's a 1, my spouse isn't a 1. I'm just using this example, but your spouse comes home, he's a 1, and he's excited that, let's say my husband was a 1, that he got that recruit that he wanted. He's a college basketball coach, that he got that recruit that he wanted, and the stress a little bit is off. Then we can go, awesome, let's go celebrate and have a date night. That would be a time to really pull them into that fun, loving space of the 7. So like I said, being discerning.
That's good. Love it. What else you got for us?
Oh man, there's so much that we can go into as far as the numbers. People train, for hours and hours and days on each of these numbers. One thing that I would say, 2 things, is what's hard about being 1 and what's great about being a 1. So what's hard about being a 1, this is just in general, and anyone out there listening is going to be able to relate to these, is that they're extremely hard on themselves at the end of the day. Just to sum up all of this, they're very hard on themselves. And so the less hard you can be on them, the better. They have a lot, they do a good enough job of that themselves. um, they always want to feel like what they're doing is good enough. And they're constantly living in this space that it's not. And so that's really hard for a one. And they often take too much responsibility, whether being in work, if they're in college or school, they're always the one taking on so much responsibility. Their shoulders often feel very heavy, whether that's with physical, emotional, mental, it doesn't matter. They often feel very heavy. And then they obsess about right and wrong all the time. They obsess about that inner critic, that inner voice that's telling them, no, that's right. They are that typical person with the devil and the angel on their shoulder. If you think about that in those terms, the one is the person that has the devil and the angel on the shoulder, constantly talking to themselves all the time. What is great about being a one? They are extremely self-disciplined, focused, and responsible. They are your person that you can go to for advice, and they love that, by the way. They love for you to come to them for advice. You can go to them for advice, and you're really going to get some good black and white advice. They're not going to sugarcoat anything. They're just going to give you some good pros and cons. They're really good at that. They work hard to make the world a better place. They truly want, at the end of the day, their core, their desire is for justice and to see things in a very right and wrong place. And so they work hard for that. They have very high standards, high morals, high ethics, and they don't really compromise on their views. They typically can be trusted in their healthy space. Mm-hmm. And then they know how to bring out the best in themselves and others when they are healthy. They really do. They know how to bring that out in people, and they really are amazing people. And the thing that I love to talk about is how these qualities parallel the character of Christ, right? And we know that he is the ultimate perfectionist. He walked this earth as our perfection.
Yeah.
And so the freedom comes for a one when we realize he walked the earth as perfection because we couldn't be that.
That's good.
So
it's good. Yeah. I think that if you're a one, or if you know a one, you now have a better understanding of how to function and how you function and what to do. I'm going to try to post this week through the week of just kind of some examples of the arrows and the lines and the growths and where all that goes in your wings and all the things. So I'm going to have some fun things going on of how to maybe interact with the one, how ones interact with you. So keep an eye out on social media. Go on to Battle Ready Co. On Instagram and on Facebook. There's a page as well. Make sure I'll put the stuff in the show notes here. Any final words before we say goodbye to the ones and get ready to say hello to the twos?
Just go be your awesome self. I think that would be my encouragement to any of our numbers. But I think that the one thing that I always remind myself of is when we don't want to see the not so pretty parts of ourselves, and ones don't like to see that because it scares them a little bit. It scares them. And so just understanding that we all have not so pretty parts of ourselves. And we all have places that we need to grow. And so when we realize that, it frees us up to walk in freedom, and it frees us up to realize the path to growth for us. And so I would just encourage you to realize that you're not the Lone Ranger. Like, we all have growth spaces that we need to walk. And so just, I always say, embrace it, embrace the ugly and do something about it. And so that would be my encouragement.
So if you haven't already, go and take the test. You'll get your three top results. Kind of sift through those three answers and figure out which one resonates with you the best. And then from there, keep that in mind. But I really encourage you to learn about all 9 types, because there's somebody in your life that is one of these 9 types. And we want to be able to interact and communicate, respect one another on a level that's deeper than we've ever done before. I love the way that you're talking about our identity and where that comes from. And I want to just reiterate that again, that this is not about, well, I'm an 8, so I'm going to go be that person, and I'm going to be stubborn in this way, and I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to act like a jerk. This doesn't give you the right to go and be a jerk to people, but this gives you an understanding of maybe why that's your first reaction.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So let's try to move closer to the healthy versions, because each one, if we can get closer to the healthy parts of each one of these numbers, man, we're going to see a world that is just beautiful.
Absolutely.
So thank you again, Angie, for getting on here and talking to us about Enneagram 1s, the moral perfectionists. And we'll dive deeper as we go. Hey, guys, I have opened up communication to help out with some coaching things. If you have questions, if you want some help with anything, not necessarily Enneagram. I'm not certified in anything, any coaching of that, but other things. We do mindset training, we do body, we do spirit training as well. So there's going to be a link in the show notes below here. Just click on that. Go to the page and it'll tell you exactly what to do. There's a short video on there of me talking about why I'm doing what I'm doing. So come be a part of that. You can set up a discovery call, be about 30 minutes, see if we're right for each other, and then we'll kick things off. Angie, I love you, girl. I can't wait to hear about number 2s and figure out how to function with them. So
Awesome.
Be your awesome selves, renew your mind, refine your body, refresh your spirit. Let's get battle ready.